Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're unpacking a really tragic event. It happened back on July 24th, 2010, at the Love Parade in Duisburg, Germany. It was a day when 21 people sadly lost their lives and, over 500 were injured. It really led to some profound questions about how we manage these huge public gatherings.
Indeed. And, crowd disasters aren't new. They're almost as old as civilization itself. Think ancient Rome, stadiums.
Yeah.
We've constantly learned lessons, built codes to prevent them.
Right.
Yet this particular incident, despite all our modern understanding of crowd dynamics, it still resulted in just staggering loss.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive really is to explore the publicly available sources, to try and understand not just what happened, but crucially why it happened, and to move beyond some common misconceptions.
That's right. And what's really fascinating here and what our sources highlight is that this isn't a simple story. It's not about finding one scapegoat or, assigning legal blame easily. It's really about understanding this complex interplay of factors that created what's called a systemic failure.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you? Whether you're managing an event or maybe just navigating a busy city street, we're going to explore this together.
And, one of the most critical insights, I think, from our sources is that the Love Parade disaster wasn't the result of just one single mistake.
Okay.
Nor was it primarily caused by things like mass panic or intentional pushing, which you often hear.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If it wasn't mass panic, what was the core phenomenon? What do our sources point to that explains this disaster?
Well, the key phenomenon, as the analysis describes it, was something called crowd turbulence, or even a crowd quake.
Crowd quake.
Yeah. This disaster is really presented as a tragic consequence of amplifying feedback loops and cascading effects, typical for systemic instabilities. It's kind of a new perspective that challenges those widely held misunderstandings, and it really emphasizes the importance of looking at all the contributing factors and how they depended on each other.
So if I'm getting this right, it's not about like one bad apple or one broken part, but how all the parts, even the seemingly okay ones, can combine to create this catastrophic chain reaction, like a small ripple becoming a tidal wave, because the conditions are just right.
Precisely. That's a great analogy. And what's truly fascinating and kind of unique here is how this detailed analysis was even possible.
How so?
It was because of an unprecedented amount of publicly available information. We're talking videos, documents, eyewitness reports, mostly gathered by ordinary citizens, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it really opened up a new age of public investigation. It enabled a level of detailed analysis that was pretty much unheard of for incidents like this before.
Okay, so to really grasp what happened that day, we kind of need to go back a bit, right? The Love Parade itself has a long history. Started in Berlin, 1989.
That's right. But by 2010, things had changed. After facing cancellations and security concerns in previous years, including in Bochum in 2009 for similar reasons, it had moved to the Ruhr area.
And that move is important.
This geographical shift is incredibly significant. The 2010 event was held in Duisburg on this former freight station area, about 100,000 square meters.
Okay.
But unlike those sprawling open spaces of the earlier Berlin parades, this area was severely constrained. You had railway tracks on one side, a freeway on the other.
Right, boxing it in.
Exactly. And the city had approved the event, but with a strict cap, 250,000 concurrent visitors, even though the organizers were apparently expecting maybe up to 1.4 million people throughout the day.
Whoa. Okay, so a massive expected crowd, a really constrained space.
Yeah, that sounds like potential issues right from the start. What did the specific layout tell us?
Well, the crucial point, the real Achilles heel, was the single access route. The festival area could only be entered and exited via one tunnel, Karl-Lehrstrasse.
Just one way in and out. Pretty much. It led to a main ramp, creating this kind of inverse T-shaped geometry. Now, there was a side ramp designated as an additional exit, but our sources say it was largely unused that day. And the main ramp itself, it was technically 26 meters wide, 130 meters long, but, and this is critical, its effective width was drastically reduced.
How?
Down to just over 10 meters because of these triangular fences they'd put up, which weren't even shown on the official maps.
Wait, hang on. So an expert report found that the maximum safe flow for that bottleneck, it was less than a third of what the organizers were expecting to handle per hour.
That's correct. Around 52,000 people per hour safe capacity versus an expected peak of 145,000.
That's a truly alarming mismatch.
It highlights a critical and frankly foreseeable problem. The expert report by Professor G. Keith Still actually indicated that significant problems with inflows, outflows, and critical crowd accumulation were pretty much to be expected.
Right.
I mean, just to put it in perspective, safe crowd conditions usually mean densities below maybe 233 people per square meter.
Right.
Once you get densities exceeding 4 or 5 people per square meter, congestion builds really fast, and the risk of falls, injuries, it just skyrockets.
And what about the actual day? Can you maybe walk us through the timeline? How do things unfold, minute by agonizing minute?
Yeah, the problems, they actually began quite early. The festival opening itself was delayed by an hour, some construction issues.
Not a great start.
No. And by 1:00 p.m., inflow was already being reduced. They were closing control points much earlier than the expected peak hours.
Okay.
Then, between about 2:15 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., the visitor concentration really increased at the end of the ramp, mostly due to obstructions from these floats, the moving music trucks.
The floats themselves were blocking things.
They were contributing, yeah. And this is where the narrative starts to get really intense.
What happened next as the crowd just kept building?
Well, communication failures were already evident by 2:30 p.m. The crowd manager apparently tried to get police support, but the liaison officer didn't have a working radio. Yeah. And by 3:30 p.m., the mobile phone networks were completely overloaded. Unusable.
Oh, man.
So around 3:31 p.m., you start seeing visitors climbing fences, climbing slopes to try and bypass these blockages. It's a desperate sign, really, of the severe pressure building up.
Yeah, people trying to escape.
Exactly. And the police, they formed multiple cordons on the ramp to try and control the flow. But these cordons often ended up inadvertently blocking both entry and exit.
Creating more bottlenecks.
Creating even more dangerous bottlenecks, yeah. Trapping people.
So by 4:00 p.m., they're making announcements saying the venue's full. But for many people trapped in that approach, it was already a desperate situation.
Precisely. Then around 4:17 p.m., that narrow staircase, it was first used as sort of an improvised escape route.
People just scrambling up it.
Trying anything. By 4:22 p.m., you see people climbing light poles, containers, just desperately trying to get out of the crush. Yeah. And then from about 4:35 p.m. to 4:43 p.m., the sources report hearing screams for help. People were panicking now, understandably, and the situation was just rapidly deteriorating. A traffic sign nearby actually started bending from the sheer pressure of the crowd.
Bending a metal sign.
The force was immense. And then around 4:48 p.m., people were observed falling to the ground, raising their hands for help. Yeah. That's a critical sign of impending fatalities.
And the first victims, they were reported just minutes later at 5:02 p.m.
That's right.
It's just chilling to hear that timeline, to imagine that pressure building second by second. And, in the chaotic aftermath, lots of people tried to grasp at simple answers, easy explanations. But our sources, they really urge us to look beyond that.
Indeed. Following the disaster, yeah, lots of theories circulated. Was it a terrorist attack? Was it people falling from that staircase? Or just, a mass panic?
Right.
But our source material pretty rigorously debunks these common assumptions.
Okay, so let's clear these up for you, the listener. First, this idea of mass panic causing a stampede, the crowd just goes mad, acts irrationally. Our sources say no.
Definitely not. While some individuals, understandably, experienced panic, especially when their lives were in immediate danger.
Of course.
There was just no evidence of that systematic, uncontrolled, everyone running in one direction movement that defines a stampede. In fact, witnesses reported many people trying to calm each other down, offering water.
So it was more about rational people making desperate choices under impossible conditions.
Exactly that. And that improper behavior people talked about, like climbing fences or structures, it wasn't recklessness.
Yeah.
It was a desperate, often rational attempt to escape deadly conditions. And crucially, this happened after the crowd was already under severe pressure, not before.
Okay, and the idea about people falling from the staircase causing the deaths.
That's also largely dismissed by the analysis. Yes, there were some falls, but apparently from relatively low heights and not concentrated where most of the fatalities actually occurred.
Okay, so if it wasn't panic and it wasn't people falling from above, what was the true cause? This brings us back to that term you used, crowd turbulence. What does that actually mean in human terms?
Well, John Fruin, who is a renowned crowd safety expert, he described it very vividly at densities of about 7 people per square meter, which is incredibly tight.
Yeah, I can barely picture that.
The crowd effectively becomes like a fluid mass, Shockwaves can literally propagate through it, propelling people meters away, sometimes lifting them right out of their shoes, tearing clothing.
Good grief.
And the intense pressure makes it incredibly difficult, almost impossible to breathe. This leads to what's called compressive asphyxia, and that was indeed diagnosed as the cause of death for most victims at the Love Parade.
That's a truly stark image. So it's not just about how many people are crammed into a space.
No, it's more than that.
It's the dynamics, the movement and the forces between them.
Correct. It's about how physical forces are kind of inadvertently transferred and amplified through bodies pressed together. This creates what are called force chains.
Force chains.
Yeah, think of it like a human domino effect almost. Pressure from one person's body gets transmitted directly and powerfully to the next, forming this almost unbreakable physical link.
Right.
And this generates an uncontrollable collective dynamic. That's what we call crowd turbulence or a crowd quake. These forces are so strong that even, a large number of police or security couldn't control them, and individuals just risk losing their balance, stumbling.
So once people fall, it creates that literal domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
A pile forms, people can't get up, and that leads to the suffocation.
Precisely. And the source material indicates this kind of turbulence was observed as early as 4:34 p.m. that day.
And it wasn't necessarily triggered by one big external event, like an emergency vehicle trying to get through or someone tripping over something.
Those things might have acted as what they call nucleation points, sort of initial sparks that ignited the problem in a specific spot. But the underlying conditions for that turbulence, they were already dangerously present. The whole event really was a classic example of systemic instability.
Systemic instability, meaning?
Meaning small disturbances, small perturbations can trigger this series of events through mutual amplification. Things just spiral out of control. Even with, everyone trying their best on the ground, the sheer interconnectedness of the problems can lead to catastrophe.
This whole situation, it really does sound like just a cascade of failures.
Yeah.
If we had to sum up the core blind spots, the things that really led to this tragedy, what would they be? Thinking about preventing future disasters.
Yeah, the analysis reveals numerous factors and, crucially, how they interacted. It wasn't just one thing.
Right.
First, you have a fundamental mismatch in planning. The location itself was inherently problematic, just not enough capacity, didn't separate incoming and outgoing flows properly. And the fact the event was approved so late, that meant sort of last-minute security concepts, not enough coordination.
Okay, inadequate planning. What else?
Second, there was a widespread breakdown in flow control and communication. You had delays in site preparation, those event floats blocking in the inflow, not enough water or toilets outside the venue, making the crowd impatient.
Ah, right. Basic needs.
Exactly. Organizers struggled to control the access points, and then the mobile networks went down, which just severely hampered critical communication and getting police support where it was needed.
Communication failure. Got it. Third,
you had flawed tactical responses. The police tactics, like forming those cordons, they're generally designed for controlling violent crowds, riots.
Right.
But here, they were completely ineffective. Worse, actually, they were detrimental. They created traps for the crowd. There seemed to be a real lack of understanding of crowd dynamics, meaning that ramp just couldn't be cleared efficiently.
Okay, wrong tactics. And fourth.
And finally, a critical lack of situational awareness at senior levels. It seems even high-ranking officials, organizers, they were reportedly unaware of the true severity of the situation hours into the crisis.
Really? Hours in?
That's what the sources suggest. It points to a critical failure in information flow, in assessment. I mean, the situation got so bad they had to implement a triage procedure.
Triage. Like in a war zone.
Exactly. Normally used for war zones or mass casualty events to prioritize aid, that's a stark indicator of just how utterly overwhelmed the entire system became.
Wow. Okay, it's clear what went wrong then. So, thinking constructively, what could have been done differently to stop this deadly chain reaction, or at least, mitigate it?
Well, our sources offer many possibilities for effective prevention. Some seem obvious in hindsight, perhaps.
Like
choosing a better suited area right from the start, one with clearly separated entry and exit flows, and just fundamentally more space, more capacity reserves.
Makes sense.
Requiring much higher organizational standards, too.
Indeed.
Earlier decision-making, which would reduce that political or commercial pressure and just allow for better, more robust preparation and coordination.
So less last-minute planning.
Absolutely. And taking safety concerns seriously from the beginning. There were apparently warning signs, like a responsible police officer reportedly quitting in protest beforehand. Those things need to be heeded.
Right. What about contingency plans?
Developing superior and, importantly, exercised contingency plans. You can't just have them on paper, especially for known bottlenecks like that ramp. Include sufficient safety margins, enough staff reserves.
And on the day itself?
Simple things, maybe. Avoiding obstacles on the ramp, like food stands or vehicles, that just reduce that effective width even more. Ensuring really robust communication systems, priority lines for mobile phones, for emergency services, working loudspeakers, megaphones, and actually using them promptly to inform and guide the crowd. Don't wait until it's too late.
Real-time communication.
Crucial. And implementing immediate pressure relief strategies as soon as jams started forming. Rerouting people, opening emergency exits much sooner, getting those floats moved away.
Be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. And maybe, crucially, empowering local police and emergency forces with more autonomous decision-making power in those critical moments, rather than having them wait for directives from higher up that might be slow coming.
Right. It sounds like the overall message, then, is that resilience, when you're organizing these huge events, it isn't just about the individual parts working okay.
No.
It's about how intricately they interact, how they adapt, how the whole system functions together.
That's it, precisely.
And speaking of understanding, our sources also seem to clear up some really important misconceptions about how crowds actually behave under that kind of extreme pressure.
Yes, this analysis really allows us to challenge some widely held, maybe even intuitive misconceptions about crowd disasters.
Like the idea that pushing is purely aggressive behavior, people just shoving their way through.
Precisely. Our sources explain that actually much of the pushing you see in these high-density crowds is unintentional. It's a direct result of those physical forces we talked about, transmitting and adding up through bodies pressed together. You literally can't help but push the person in front of you if you're being pushed from behind.
Okay.
Now, intentional pushing does happen, of course, when people get impatient due to long waits or lack of information or just feeling threatened by the density, but it's generally not the primary cause of fatalities in these crush events.
Okay, that's a key distinction. And what about the idea of a crowd crushing others, like actively pressing them?
Yeah, the term crushing often implies this sort of uncontrolled surge forward into a bottleneck. But in Duisburg, the sources say the crowd barely moved forward at the point of disaster.
So what happened?
Instead, what happened was that crowdquake phenomenon, characterized by these fluctuating but extreme pressures within the static crowd due to the high density. That causes the crowd turbulence, where people are moved uncontrollably, lose their balance. It's less about systematic forward motion and more about chaotic internal forces literally squeezing the air out of people.
Right. And trampling. Does that mean people just carelessly walking over others who have fallen?
Not quite, or at least not always. The source material stresses the distinction between actively trampling someone and being trampled.
Oh, yeah.
When people fall in a dense, turbulent crowd, they create these holes, these gaps. To avoid falling in themselves, that domino effect, again, people around them might be physically forced to step on those who are down.
Oh, I see.
It's often presented as a desperate survival mechanism in that split second, not necessarily malicious intent.
So it really comes down to the laws of physics, as the source states it, not just psychology, driving these devastating dynamics.
Exactly. And that understanding fundamentally changes how we need to approach prevention and management.
Yeah, that changes everything.
And a really crucial outcome of this analysis, I think, is understanding that crowd behavior, especially in these high-density situations, it follows certain almost predictable laws of nature.
Laws of nature.
Well, yeah, laws stemming from fundamental human needs. We all need sufficient space, right? Access to food, water, air, toilets. We need to feel safe. We need a sense of progress, like we're actually getting somewhere. And we need information and communication.
Basic human requirements.
Absolutely. And ignoring these needs or allowing shortcomings in meeting them to accumulate, that significantly increases the risk of disaster.
This is where those preventative measures become so critical then.
Yeah.
And the paper introduces a new scale, doesn't it, to assess how critical crowd conditions are getting. How does this help us understand and maybe prevent future disasters?
Yeah, it's quite insightful. It provides a framework for proactive intervention, basically. It ranges from level 0, which is normal, low risk, densities below 2-3 persons per square meter, all the way up to level 8, which is a state of serious emergency where people are literally crawling over others.
Okay.
But the real insight is how it maps those subtle shifts in between, acting as early warning signs.
Give us an example.
Sure. So, like, level 1. You just see people starting to accumulate, things are slowing down. Your action. Start limiting inflows, gather more information, figure out what's happening.
Okay, early stage.
Then maybe level 3. You start seeing stop and go waves in the crowd. People are getting pushed around involuntarily even when the crowd is moving. That's the time to implement pressure relief strategies. Open those emergency routes. Remove any obstacles. Be decisive.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Then you get to, say, level 5. People are now disregarding fences, maybe climbing things, desperately trying to get out. The situation is critical now, likely getting out of control. Immediate action. You need to think about evacuation, providing help.
Yeah, and the higher levels.
Level 7. This is when people are actually seen falling to the ground, maybe raising their arms for help like we saw in the reports from Duisburg. Many injuries are expected at this point. A disaster is likely already happening or imminent. Your action has to be immediate help on site and preparing hospitals for a mass emergency.
It sounds like this shift, thinking in terms of criticality levels, it fundamentally changes the approach, right? Moving way beyond just reacting when it's already a full-blown crisis.
Absolutely. It's about proactive monitoring and intervention based on observable signs.
Which leads us to another really fascinating conclusion from the source material you mentioned earlier, this emerging relevance of citizen science.
Yes, that was quite striking. The sheer volume and also the transparency of the materials collected by volunteers after the Love Parade disaster. It was really unprecedented.
So you're saying regular people, not official agencies, were the ones collecting and organizing hundreds of videos, photos, eyewitness accounts.
Right.
How did that volume of publicly available info change things?
Exactly. This huge volunteer effort provided in many ways more transparent and complete documentation than public institutions often make available, or at least make available quickly. And it was certainly far more accessible than a lot of the media reporting at the time.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, academic experts are still crucial for interpreting all that data, distinguishing relevant factors from noise. But citizen science has fundamentally changed the landscape of disaster investigation here by providing this incredible raw data set.
So it's become a really powerful new tool for public safety, maybe even for accountability.
Potentially, yes. And it also highlights a broader societal issue, doesn't it?
Which is?
The systemic nature of many of these crowd disasters, and you could argue other systemic risks too, like financial crises. It makes assigning clear legal responsibility incredibly difficult.
Because it's not one person's fault.
Exactly. How do you quantify individual contributions to a systemic failure? It's almost impossible. And this difficulty ultimately erodes public trust in institutions because people want clear answers, clear accountability.
Yeah, I could see that.
So the source material actually calls for more political and regulatory attention to this fundamental problem, recognizing that when a whole system fails, the blame often falls broadly, which might feel unsatisfying, but might also be the most accurate picture.
Wow, what a deep dive this has been. It really wasn't just about a single tragic event, was it? It feels more like a masterclass in understanding complex systems. And why, as our source put it so well, a safety culture must be actively promoted. The motto should be, don't take it easy, always expect the unexpected.
That quote really resonates. This deep dive is a powerful reminder, I think, that when we're managing complex systems, whether it's a mass event or city traffic or even financial markets, we have to look beyond just individual failures.
Yeah.
We have to understand those powerful, often invisible forces of interdependencies and those potential cascading effects.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Perhaps it's a reminder to, question the simple narratives you sometimes hear, to look for those hidden connections between things. And maybe to appreciate that even the most well-intentioned efforts can go terribly wrong if the system itself isn't designed to be resilient.
And maybe consider how these principles apply to the complex systems you encounter every day. Where are the potential bottlenecks in your own routines, or maybe in your workplace? What are the unrecognized interdependencies?
Right.
And how might small problems, small perturbations, potentially cascade into larger ones? Thinking this way, applying that systemic lens, it can make you incredibly well-informed, and perhaps even help you prevent your own crowdquake moments, big or small.
That's a great final thought. That's it for this deep dive. We really hope you feel a little more well-informed and maybe, like me, a little surprised by some of what we uncovered today. Until next time.